The hero archetype. The hero archetype in our culture, our culture raises men to always be puffing out our chest and always be ready for a fight and willing to fight. Now, this is the aspect of the hero archetype, which makes us the conqueror. We're going to take on our problems in the world, and and then that's what brings us a lot of beautiful masculinity, is the hero archetype. However, there's an over-exaggeration and there's a dark side or a shadow side of the hero archetype. And in our culture, we do not cultivate an idea of humility and tenderness. And these are the things that are missing from our culture. To be a man in our culture, you're always puffing out your chest, you're always beating your chest, you're always fixing problems, and it takes a toll. And we see this play out in our culture through the startling statistics of suicide. Because when we go to the shadow side of an archetype, we then are playing it. We're playing in the ego's realm, and we're not playing in our soul's realm. So our soul is telling us one thing, and our culture is telling us something else. And so there has to be a softening, and there needs to be an understanding. And truly, what needs to happen is that you have to allow the trickster archetype to come into play. So I'm going to give you an example from my own experience. When I began to wake up and find some philosophies that were starting to make sense in articulating what I wanted to do, one of the things that I did is I went out, because I was willing to do anything to change myself. I made that commitment to myself. So what I did is I signed up for a men's group at a church. And I can tell you, and I can go right back to the moment as I pulled into the parking lot of the church to experience men's group. I was so excited about it, but I had this dreadful fear. I had this dreadful overwhelming of uncomfort and unease walking into the men's group. And it was for two reasons. One was because at the end of the group, we get into a circle and we wrap our arms around each other and we look into one another's eyes. And it sounds funny saying it in retrospect, but it was very real in that moment. And what I look back and see that as is that was an aspect of the shadow side of the hero archetype. I was taught that, that homosexuality was wrong, and having any kind of intimate relationship with men was not appropriate. And that's not what this was. This was allowing the ease of the hero archetype. And the other aspect of it that made me uncomfortable was the trickster. I was completely an ego, and I was always trying to impress everybody in the group. But there was something very special about our men's group, and I couldn't explain it really well when I was in it. And what the evidence that showed up was that our men's group stayed together, and many other men's groups at the same church were breaking down. And the reason was those would turn into bullshit sessions, whereas our group, we were being vulnerable. We were allowing the humiliating times in our life to show up in a very real way. And this allowed a whole nother level and a dimension. And that's the trickster archetype. That was the allowing of humility, humiliation, humble. And that allowed for the opening of hearts, and it opened for a flow of something different. And so what it did is it brought us into understanding how to live in the peaceful warrior paradox, because that's what we're sent to do as men, is be warriors but also peaceful. And how you walk that line of that paradox is what makes all the difference. In our culture, it's all about basically being the warrior. And So when it comes to men, probably the biggest thing that I would say is that there has to be a softening and edge. And this happens a lot of times, you know, as people wake up. You could talk to lots of women who are waking up. They're waking up earlier in their 30s and 40s, but they're finding men in their 50s. Because that's what the hero archetype does, is it finally exhausts itself. And you finally throw up your arms and you say, I can't do this anymore. I can't live in the hero archetype anymore because it's too overwhelming and it's too consuming of our power to live in both the dark side and the soft side of the hero archetype. And so in our culture, we're constantly asked to be in our in the dark side as well of the hero archetype. And so part of waking up is just learning to be humble and allow the trickster to show up a bit.